This video is part of Modern History. It is basically a crash course wherein you will quickly learn everything about East India Company from 1600 to 1857. All the events will be covered in a chronological manner. We will also make a beautiful timeline. I'll show you how the events are interconnected, and in the end it's going to be a nice, fun, informative session. With no further ado, let's begin. First, let me make a timeline, an empty timeline. As we go ahead, we will start filling in the dates of the events and it will be easier for you to follow up. Great. First thing first, the Indian history has been divided into three parts, and they are ancient history, medieval history, and then modern history. Now, modern history is the part where we typically talk about the time when India was under the rule of British Empire. And medieval history is the time from 8th to 18th century. In the later part of this time period, India was under the Islamic rule, that is from 13th to 18th century. During this time, the famous Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire were the direct rulers of major portion of the Indian subcontinent. So to understand the British rule in India, we have to go a little backward towards the end of medieval period, when the Mughal Empire came to an end after the death of their last influential and powerful emperor. Here are the list of Mughal emperors who ruled India. In this, Aurangzeb was the last powerful Mughal ruler. After him, none of them were that influential. However, Bahadur Shah Zafar was the last emperor till 1857. So we can say that the Mughal Empire officially came to an end by 1857. Nevertheless, situation changed right after the death of Aurangzeb, so that's where the real story starts. One more thing you need to remember here is that the Europeans had already discovered India way before Mughal invasion. Mughal era started in 1526 with Babur being the first emperor. If you remember Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer, he was the first European to discover the sea route to India in 1498. He went to the harbour in Calicut, which is now Kozhikode, on the Malabar coast. There they had set up their first trading post. Moments back I said that Aurangzeb was the last powerful Mughal ruler, but he died in 1707. We'll now put this date on the timeline. Now, as soon as a powerful influential ruler died, all of his governors, who were also known as Subedars and the big zamindars, they all slowly started dividing because it is now beneficial for them to establish their own small regional kingdoms so that they can be the king. It's like now the emperor is dead, so forget Delhi, forget the center, no one cares what's going to happen. Let's get back to our regional places and establish our own rule. Things of that sort were happening. Now we have the dates 1707 and 1498. Let's get to know what happened in between. At 1498, Portuguese came to India. They came to Calicut. After the Portuguese, the Dutch fleet arrived in Pulicat in 1595. Then came the British, who landed in Surat in 1608. After them, the Danish came to Tranquebar in Tamil Nadu in 1616. And at last, the French came to Pondicherry in 1664. They all were collectively called as European traders. Cool. Now that we have the dates on the timeline, let's understand how the British arrived in India, because that's what we are interested in. So you see, everyone arrived at different locations. Since Portuguese came to India almost 100 years before any of the European traders, they had more number of trading posts compared to other European traders. Let's understand how the British arrived in India, because that's what we are interested in. So it all started in 1600. The English company acquired a charter from the then ruler of England, Queen Elizabeth I. Charter means a written legislative paper of a country. So Queen Elizabeth I signed a paper where she gave in particular this English company complete individual right to trade with the eastern countries. Now with this charter, the company went to the eastern side through ocean route, looking for new lands from which it could buy goods at cheap price and carry them back to Europe to sell at higher prices. Basically, they wanted to be the loan shark. And why so? Because as per the signed charter, no other English trading company could trade. But then, if you look at the timeline, there are other European traders that already arrived in India before the British, like the Portuguese and Dutch. So that means Britain was not alone. While they didn't see any competition from their own country, but their competition were the other European traders. Remember this. Okay, now that everyone has arrived on the scene, there comes a big problem. All these European trading companies were interested in buying the same products, and that was fine qualities of cotton and silk. Apart from silk, they were also interested in spices like pepper, cloves, cardamom, and cinnamon. These all had huge market demand in Europe. So they all had a plan to take it back to European market and sell it for higher prices to make huge profit. You see, now the Britain is no more the lone shark. There are other sharks in the competition. Now, seeing this demand, the Indian traders who were selling these goods to them, they increased the prices of goods. And that's an obvious demand price economics. If the demand is high, naturally the prices would go up. This in turn affected the profit margin of these European traders. So instead of finding different ways to minimize the cost, the only reasonable solution they could think of was to eliminate their competitors. Now you see the sharks are fighting among themselves. This led to fierce battles between these European trading companies. All throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, that is from 1600 to 1700, they regularly sank each other's ships, blocked routes, and prevented rival ships from moving with supplies of goods. They even fortified their posts, meaning they built big walls to protect their trading post. Now here's the funny thing. When you fortify your trading post and